Welcome to Left the Chat. We are not for budget cards, we are not for expensive cards, we just have left the chat on the table. An EDH deck building channel to help you make synergistic decks for games of Commander. Today in this video we'll be looking at Saheeli Radiant Creator and building a synergistic deck to use her as our commander. So let's take a look at her stat line. Saheeli Radiant Creator is a 4/4 legendary human artificer who costs 1 green, blue, and red. She's a teamer commander that reads whenever you cast an artificer or artifact spell, you get 1 energy counter. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 3 energy, and when you do, create a token that's a copy of a target permanent you control, except it's a 5/5 artifact creature in addition to its other types and has haste, sacrificed at the beginning of the next end step. Saheeli reads a lot like the Mishra precon that came out in the Brothers' War. She's looking to make copies of the permanents she controls. A lot of people will focus on the artifact spell casting, whereas I've considered the artificer side instead. Our goal is to get artificers on the board to create additional energy as much as possible, and then take copies of those artificers and other permanents that are important to us. The plan. Knowing that Saheeli gives us a new artifact creature every combat for only 3 energy means that we need to use that to our benefit. Creatures like Bruticlad, Telcore Engineer will create additional tokens on combat as well, and will make them all the same, making whatever permanent we want to copy the strongest creature on board, or the most useful permanent on board. Gimbal Gremlin Prodigy will help our artifact creatures have trample, and on the end step we can trigger it to make a Gremlin artifact creature token that has all the counters of the different named artifacts we had to begin with. Lightning Runner is a great human warrior who can make our combats continue over and over by paying out energy. Avia Automech Artisan and Sandstorm Salvager make a way for us to give all of our creatures trample, meaning that if we do have a large army of these artifact creatures, we can get through to our opponents. And finally, Workshop Elders will make sure that we can get through by giving evasive maneuvers to our creatures. All artifact creatures will have line when this is on the board. All of these cards will help us spend our energy, make copies of our tokens, and give them a way to get through to our opponents for a combat damage win, which is most likely the biggest part of our plan. Making energy. To have Saheeli's plan work, we also need a large amount of energy. In this deck there is quite a few artificers, but beyond them we need to make energy consistently. A lot of cards from the precon are kept, such as Aetherflex Conduit, Aetheric Amplifier, Nissa World Soul Speaker, Pia Nalar Chief Mechanic, the precon's other commander, Pima Trailblazer, and Rampaging Aetherhood, all of which do different things to give us energy. So let's take a look at the cards that will be helping us. Aetherflux Conduit says that whenever we cast a spell, we get an amount of energy equal to the mana spent on the cast. Aether Refinery says that we will get 1 additional energy every time we create energy. Aetherworks Marvel says that whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get an energy. Architect of the Untamed says that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy. And so does Royal Cartographer. Nissa World Soul Speaker, which came with precon for Saheeli, also says whenever a land you control enters, you get energy, but twice as much. Is It Generatorium says that if you would get energy, you get additional energy, and it can be tapped to draw a card. Decoshion Model says that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy. Cards like Rogue Refiner will enter the battlefield, draw you a card, and give you energy. Rampaging Aetherhood lets you get energy on your upkeep and use it to grow that creature. Pima Trailblazer gives you energy for hitting your opponents and has trample to help it do so. And Pia Nalar says that whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may get 2 energy as well. Other cards that will help us in creating energy are cards like Aetheric Amplifier, that is a mana rock that also says double the number of each kind of counter on target permanent, or double the number of each kind of counter you have, helping us double the amount of energy we have. Similarly, Panharmonicon that comes with the precon as well, just simply says that if an artifact or creature entering causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time, which links completely with Saheeli and all the artificers we have entering the battlefield. Conjurer's Closet, which came with the precon, has been kept in the deck, as at the beginning of your end step it reads, you may exile target creature you control and return it to the battlefield under your control. Though there are not too many ETB effects in this deck, there is still enough to make that worth it. Artifact synergies. Some of the cards we're playing that are very important to our build are artifacts. And because we also have artifact creatures being made with Saheeli's abilities, we need some things to do with those. A very obvious one is to ping our opponents equally with creatures like Reckless Fireweaver and Ingenious Artillerist that say whenever an artifact you control enters, that creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. To push that idea across, Aether Revolt has been added and says that as long as a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, it deals that damage +2 instead, making Reckless Fireweaver and Ingenious Artillerist quite strong. And also says whenever you get 1 or more energy, Aether Revolt deals that much damage to any target. Stridehanger Automation came with the precon and is a fantastic card that gives Thopters +1/+1 as an anthem, and also says that if 1 or more artifact tokens will be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional Thopter token will be created as well. Master Transmuter lets us use creatures like the Thopters made by Stridehanger Automation or other artifacts that we might have lying around, and we can return those artifacts to our hand. This can also be a great way to save the artifacts we have on the board. You can then put an artifact card from your hand into the battlefield to replace it, likely something much better than a Thopter. Togo, Goblin Weaponsmith, is in the deck because he can make rocks quite easily. Just by land entering, a simple artifact will enter. If Stridehanger is out, it can then make a Thopter, and then the rock can be thrown to Master Transmuter to be gotten rid of and to instead be replaced by one of our many better artifacts. Adaptive Omnitool is an example of one of those artifacts. This is an equipment that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Whenever an equipped creature attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Quite a good way to cycle through your cards to get to the artifact you wish. Forensic Gadgeteer is in here because whenever you cast an artifact spell, you'll investigate, giving us more tokens that we can use on things like Master Transmuter. It also says that the activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate, making our rocks and other artifacts quite useful alongside this. We also have Arkham Dagson, a legendary creature, human artificer, that says it can tap a target artifact creature's controller sacrifices it. That player may search their library for a non-creature artifact card, put it into play, and shuffle their library. This is quite another good way, like Master Transmuter, to take something like one of Togo's rocks, or a clue token, or a Thopter, and turn it into one of our much better artifacts. Finally, Goblin Engineer is designed that when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, put it into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. You can pay a red, tap and sacrifice an artifact, and return that artifact from the graveyard back to the battlefield. Removal. In this deck, we don't have as much removal as we might need, but that is okay. It is a blue-red-green deck after all, not exactly its forte. We use a series of counter spells with Arcane Denial and Disallow so that we can stop activated abilities and triggered abilities, as well as draw ourselves some cards. Reality Shift is here as well, so that we can exile a target creature, and 3 cards give us the option to wipe the board. Aether Squall Ancient lets us spend our energy that we have been accruing to return all other creatures to their owner's hand. Blasphemous Act will wipe the board by destroying other creatures, and Territorial Aether Kite gives us a little bit of leeway with what we want to destroy, being less symmetrical if need be. You can pay energy the amount of power of the creatures you wish to destroy. The other cards. Besides Draw, Ramp and Lands, there are quite a few cards that don't fit into one category and are technically on their own. Feldon the Third Path and Saheeli the Sun's Brilliance are great ways to copy creatures we might have on board, whether they are the artifact creatures created by our commander, the Radiant Creator, or are other creatures that we have on board. Adric, mathematical genius from the Doctor Who series, says that it can copy a targeted, activated, or triggered ability you control and choose new targets for the copy, meaning that it can also double up as making an additional Saheeli trigger. It also is able to be sacrificed to counter a triggered ability or activated ability, which can come in second hand as an additional way to deal with removal. We have two creatures who don't really fit any of my categories, but I think are quite useful. Multiform Wonder is a creature that enters and gives energy to the player, but also can have energy spent on it to give it other abilities, such as lifelink, which is what has interested me in the creature in the first place. It being an artifact creature means it has some light synergies with other cards that we are playing, but most importantly can be one of the ways we can gain life. Rapid Augmenter is an example of a creature that doesn't fit the deck too well, but being an artificer, it creates energy on entry, and though its first ability is not as useful to us, whenever another creature you control enters, if it wasn't cast, which is what Saheeli's ability does, put a +1/+1 counter on Rapid Augmenter, and Rapid Augmenter can't be blocked turn, meaning it can be used to strike hard against our opponents. Lightning Greaves is a great protection spell that comes with the precon and makes sense to have here. We want to protect Saheeli, and we don't need too much protection because we can cast her quite easily with all of the ramp we have, but she's not the only thing we need in the deck to hopefully win, and therefore is the only protection spell we have. Card draw. In our card draw section, we have some interesting creatures that help us in lots of ways. A few of these creatures are artificers, meaning they make energy on entry, and some of them have other abilities or create energy in some kind of way. First of all, Elder Gargaroth was one of the harder cards to cut from the original precon, as is the 6/6 body that has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and can draw you a card every time it attacks. This is a great creature to use as an example of what Saheeli's ability can make copies of. Drawing a card each time, gaining free life each time is so very useful. Era of Innovation was not on the list of energy creators, but whenever an artifact or an artificer enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay the additional 1 mana, and if you do, you'll get 2 energy, making all of our artificers enter to create 3 energy, paying for some of our things that need 3 energy paid into, and is a great card. It also says that we can pay 6 of our energy to sacrifice it and draw 3 cards if we desperately need them. Glimmer of Genius scries 2, then draws 2 cards and gives you 2 energy. At 4 cost, this is not exactly the best example of a draw spell, but is useful here to help us have a look at our deck, give us some cards, and give us some energy. Again, there are lots of better options like Ponder that you could replace this with, but this I think fits the deck. Creatures like Padim, Console of Innovation, Sage of Latnam, Transplant Theorist, and Veronica, Dissident Scribe, are some creatures that have a way of drawing us cards. Padim, at the beginning of our upkeep, will allow us to draw a card if we have the highest CMC artifact. Sage will let us sacrifice any artifact, like one of Togo's rocks, a Thopter, a clue token, to draw a card. Transplant Theorist says that whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard one, letting us cycle through our deck. And also lets us put a card from our graveyard back on the top of our library to give it a second life. Veronica is able to give us a card when attacking, and whenever she does, we discard a card. By doing so, we draw a card. When we discard a card though, 1 or more non-land cards for the first time each turn, we create more tokens, a junk token to be exact. Wheel of Potential is a fantastic wheel spell that gives us energy and lets us pay energy. This makes it so that people exile their hands and draw 7 new cards. Ramp Package. Again, our ramp package is filled with cards that have to do with energy or artifacts, etc., but also just helps us get more mana. Arcane Signet simply gives us colors from our commander. Chromatic Lantern makes our lands multiple colors. Harrow and Explosive Vegetation alongside Nature's Law allow us to get more lands from our deck, including those that are forests. Seal Seeker says that whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library, and if it's a land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't, it goes into your graveyard. Attune with Aether is a specific ramp card that says search your library for a basic land card and reveal it. Put it into your hand and then shuffle your library, while also giving you 2 energy, which is quite a useful common. Midnight Clock allows us to get blue mana, but if we're lucky enough to go through its 12 ticks, lets us wheel our hand hand, put our graveyard and our hand back into our deck to get 7 new cards. Primal Prayers says that when it enters you'll get some energy, and then it sits on the battlefield as an enchantment that says you may cast creature spells with mana value 3 or less by paying energy rather than paying for their mana cost. And finally, Solar Transformer is a mana rock 2 cost that gives you 3 energy on entry, and then can be tapped to either make colorless mana or pay a single energy while being tapped to add any mana of any color. Lands. In the Saheeli Radiant Creator pre-con deck, there were artifact lands and lands that tap for the cost of 1 to produce 2 different colours. I like these lands, but personally don't like playing with them. Instead, I've used cards like Cascade Bluffs, Flooded Grove, and Firelit Thicket to do the same idea. I've included the cycle from Innistrad that allow you to play them untapped if you have 2 or more other lands, including Dreamroot Cascade, Stormcarved Coast, and Rockfall Vale. Helios 1, if available, would be a great card to add, as you can gain energy from it, or pay energy to destroy and target non-land permanent with it. And though they're pricey, Breeding Pool and Stomping Ground have been added to make sure that there are 2 more forests of multicolour to be able to be chosen. You could go with the snow lands here, or the tapped ones that say forest on them, instead if you want to save yourself some money. Similarly, I think that though Rockfell Vale, Dreamroot Cascade, Firelit Thicket, Flooded Grove, Cascade Bluffs, and Stormcarved Coast are great additions to this deck, they also come with a price tag, so if you'd like to keep the others you can. The cards I recommend removing though are definitely the artifact lands. If there is artifact removal and you have those lands to make your double covered mana, I don't think it's going to end well. It is good to have them there to turn them into creatures or use them in some way, if that is the final option. However, that final option is less likely than the possibility that those lands become nothing early on. Like I've said before, everyone spends different amounts on lands, and therefore go with your budget. If you would like channel lands from Kamigawa, or if you want other things that are more expensive, then perhaps consider them. Things like Academy Ruins and Aether Hub were kept because they are quite useful with this deck. Even Path of Ancestry was kept because there are so many artificers being cast. Make sure you choose carefully about what it is you're after, and stick to the 38, 39, 37 land kind of area. And that's it. We left the chaff on the table. We've built a really cool synergistic deck that might be a lot more interesting and different to the ones we're going to see from people focusing on artifacts. Artifact decks are so cool, and I've made so many of them. I'm sure many people watching this have too. And obviously it could be a much more powerful deck, but I'm all about synergy. And I think that this deck is built to kind of match itself in ways that will continue to excite you. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you consider subscribing to the channel and liking it, because obviously that shows me that you're interested in seeing more, and I have plans to make as many of these as I possibly can. Your support makes me want to do it more. If you had other ideas for the deck, make sure you put them in the comments. I want to hear what you have to say. Your ideas always help more synergy come about or create an even better deck. If you want to take a better look at the deck, make sure you go to the description and go to the Moxfield link to go look at it on my Moxfield account. So until next time, thank you again for watching, and make sure you have left the chaff on the table.